Before you think you know my story, let me tell you how it began. On my 65th birthday, I thought I was going to a quiet dinner with my daughter Claire. I put on my favorite lavender sweater, the one I wore to story time at the library for years, and stacked a pile of old books I'd saved for her. Dog-eared novels we used to read together. I even baked her favorite oatmeal cookies, the kitchen smelling like warmth and memory. But instead of laughter and clinking glasses, I was handed a packed bag and left behind. Betrayal, I learned that day, doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it wears the face of the child you raised. I woke up that morning in my small house in Albany, New York, with a flutter in my chest. At 65, I was alone, but not lonely. I'd spent decades as a librarian, helping kids find stories, organizing, community book drives, and I still felt useful. Claire hadn't called much lately. Her job as a marketing exec kept her busy, she said, but I was sure she'd show up today. I set the table for two, cookies in the center, and waited. By noon, the house was silent. My phone didn't buzz. I checked it anyway, rereading her last text. "Work's crazy, Mom. Talk soon." My heart dipped, but I pushed the doubt away. She'd come. She had to. I've always believed a mother's love is like a book you never finish writing. Every page holds a piece of your heart, no matter how the story twists. For Claire, I wrote chapters of sacrifice, love, and forgiveness. As a librarian in Albany, I spent my days surrounded by stories, but the one I cherished most was hers. I'd sit her on my lap at the library after hours, reading Charlotte's Web under the glow of a desk lamp, her tiny fingers tracing the words. I saved every penny from my modest salary to send her to college, even pawned my mother's pearl necklace when her tuition came due. When my husband, Tom, passed 5 years ago, I leaned on Claire, hoping our shared grief would bring us closer. But she grew distant, her calls shorter, her visits rare. Still, I made excuses. She was building a life. She was busy. I clung too, that hope like a worn bookmark in a favorite novel. That morning, my 65th birthday, I stood in my kitchen, the smell of oatmeal cookies fading as the clock ticked past 1. I'd arranged those books for Claire, classics like To Kill a Mockingbird and The Secret Garden, hoping they'd remind her of our old evenings together. I pictured her walking through the door, her sharp bob and confident smile, maybe even a hug. I'd forgive the silence, the missed calls, because that's what mothers do. By 2, I was pacing, my fingers brushing the spine of a book on the counter, my heart sinking deeper. I texted her, "Hope you're coming, sweetheart," but the screen stayed blank. At 3, the doorbell rang. My chest lifted. I opened the door to Claire, her smile tight, her eyes avoiding mine. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said, holding a single grocery store carnation. I hugged her anyway, ignoring the sting in my chest. "You're here," I whispered. She nodded. "Get your coat. I've got a surprise." The moment I saw the sign, Maple Grove Senior Care, my stomach twisted like a page torn from a book. Claire's car rolled up a long driveway past trees, with leaves turning brittle and gold. I'd been so caught up in her surprise that I hadn't noticed we weren't heading to any restaurant. "Claire, what is this?" I asked, my voice sharp. She cleared her throat, eyes fixed on the wheel. "Mom, it's not safe for you to live alone anymore. You're forgetting things." "Forgetting things?" I snapped. "I've never forgotten. A single due date in 30 years at the library. She ignored me parking the car. This place is nice. You'll have friends, activities. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in my chest. You brought me here on my birthday. Claire stepped out, opened the trunk, and there it was, my suitcase, packed with clothes I hadn't chosen. I stared, frozen as she said, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. The receptionist smiled too brightly, handing Claire papers, legal forms with my name and her signature. Power of attorney, just like that. I didn't cry, not yet. They led me to a room with beige walls, a stiff bed, and a shelf holding 3 outdated magazines, not a single book worth reading. My birthday gift, a prison dressed up as care. That night, I sat on the bed, still in my lavender sweater clutching the wilted carnation Claire had given me. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of a nurse's cart and a distant cough. I'd spent my life organizing stories, helping people find answers in books, but now I was a number on a chart. Claire had taken my phone, saying it would confuse me. I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased. My roommate, Mabel, was a frail woman who whispered about her sons who never visited. I listened, her ache mirroring mine. I tried to stay sharp, flipping through those awful magazines, mentally cataloging the room like I used to sort library shelves. But the truth was sinking in. Claire didn't just want me out of her life. She wanted control of my money, my house, maybe even my memory. Days blurred. The staff called me dear, their kindness laced with pity. No one asked about the library, the kids I'd taught to love stories, or the community book drives I'd run. To them, I was just another old woman in slippers fading away. But I wasn't fading. Not yet. By the 5th day at Maple Grove, I felt like a book left on a shelf, untouched and gathering dust. The routine was suffocating. Meals at precise hours. Nurses checking my pulse like I was already half gone. I'd stopped eating much, not out of protest, but because the food tasted like the truth, bland and hard to swallow. Then I met Sophia. She was a young aide with warm brown eyes and a habit of humming while she worked. She wasn't supposed to be on shift that day, but someone called in sick, and there she was checking my chart. "You don't seem like you belong here," she said softly, her words startling me. I looked up from the magazine I'd been pretending to read. "You've got a spark," she added, smiling. "Most folks here, they've lost it." I didn't know why, but I told her about Claire, the birthday, the suitcase. She listened, really listened, not just nodding like the others. Later that afternoon, she came back, slipping a faded envelope into my hand. "Found this in the storage room," she whispered. "It was with some old residence things. No one claimed it." Inside was a letter from my late husband, Tom, his handwriting shaky but unmistakable. It mentioned a bank account in Switzerland, one I'd never heard of, with a login code and a note. "For you, Ellie, if you ever need it." My heart raced. Using the lounge's ancient computer, I typed in the code, my fingers trembling from years of cataloging books. The screen loaded. $15 million. I covered my mouth, the room spinning. This wasn't just money, it was a lifeline. But if Claire found out, she'd never let me go. I folded the letter, tucked it into my sweater, and knew I had to act fast. Fear wasn't joy, but it was alive, and for the first time in days, so was I. That night, I barely slept. Tom's letter pressed against my chest like a secret I couldn't let slip. $15 million wasn't just a number. It was a chance to rewrite my story, but only if I moved faster than Claire's lies. I wasn't the fragile woman she thought she'd locked away. I'd spent 30 years at the library tracking down obscure books, organizing chaos into order. If I could find a first edition Huck Finn for a stubborn professor, I could find a way out of Maple Grove. Sophia became my lifeline. The next morning, I pulled her aside in the hallway, my voice low. "I need help," I said, showing her the letter. Her eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. "There's a lawyer who visits sometimes, helps with wills. He's discreet." That afternoon, she introduced me to Daniel, a young attorney with sharp eyes and a quiet confidence. We sat in a corner of the break room, the hum of a vending machine masking our words. I slid the letter across the table. "Can you keep this safe?" I asked. "And help me disappear?" He didn't flinch. "We'll need to move fast," he said, already jotting notes. Daniel worked like I used to at the library, methodical, precise. He set up a blind trust, my name nowhere on it, to shield the money. He arranged a new phone, a temporary mailing, address and papers for a modest house in rural Virginia, far from Albany's prying eyes. Claire would never trace it. The night I left, Sophia hugged me tightly. "Be free," she whispered. I slipped out before dawn, wearing a borrowed coat, carrying a small duffel with just a few clothes and Tom's letter. The bus ride was cold, the road stretching endlessly, but I felt alive. I sat in the back, hood up, clutching the bag like it held my soul. In a way, it did. The Virginia house was simple, a one-story cottage with peeling paint and a creaky porch, but it had heat, clean water, and silence. Not the suffocating silence of Maple Grove, but the kind that let you breathe. I unpacked my few belongings, arranging them like I used to sort library shelves. Clothes in neat piles, Tom's letter in a locked box under the bed. Then I got to work. Using a burner laptop Daniel had provided, I started digging. I'd always been good at finding things, lost books, forgotten facts, and now I was searching for the truth about Claire. I pulled up old bank statements, emails she'd sent about managing my finances. That's when I found it. A transfer, small but suspicious, from my savings to an account I didn't recognize, dated a year before Tom died. My hands shook. Claire hadn't just betrayed me at Maple Grove. She'd been siphoning money for years. I leaned back, the cottage's quiet wrapping around me. Claire thought she'd shelved me away, out of sight, out of her way. But I was no longer just a mother clinging to love. I was a librarian with a puzzle to solve, and I'd spent my life finding answers in the stacks. Claire had no idea what was coming. The Virginia cottage became my war room, its small table covered with printouts and scribbled notes like the research desks I used to manage at the library. I'd always loved solving puzzles, finding a book for a student, tracing a rare manuscript's history. But this was different. This was my life, and Claire had torn it apart. I started with the bank transfer I'd found, a $5,000 withdrawal she'd labeled home repairs for a house I'd never fixed. I dug deeper, pulling up records Daniel had helped me access. There were more, loans in my name, credit cards I'd never applied for, all linked to Claire's sleek marketing firm. My hands trembled as I pieced it together. She hadn't just taken me to Maple Grove to protect me. She'd been stealing from me and Tom for years, draining our savings while I made excuses for her distance. But the truth cut deeper than money. Late one night, I found a locked folder in Tom's old email account, one Claire had never bothered to check. I guessed the password, Ellie 1960, the year we met, and opened it. Inside was a scanned document, yellowed and creased, an adoption certificate from 1985. Claire's name was there, but not ours. She wasn't our biological daughter. Tom and I had adopted her as a newborn, a secret we'd kept to protect her, to love her fully as our own. My breath caught. I remembered Tom's hesitation when Claire asked about her childhood, the way he'd changed the subject. He'd wanted to tell her, but I'd insisted we wait. Now another email from Claire to a private investigator 2 years ago confirmed. She knew. She'd found out after Tom died and never told me. The pieces fell into place like a book snapping shut. Claire wasn't just after money. She was erasing me to bury the truth. If I was locked away, labeled confused or incompetent, no one would question her claim to our estate or her identity as our real daughter. Maple Grove wasn't care. It was a cage to keep me silent. I sat back, the laptop's glow casting shadows on the cottage walls. I saw every moment I'd loved her, teaching her to read, cheering at her graduation, wiping her tears when boys broke her heart. I'd poured my soul into her, but she'd seen me as a liability, a loose end in her carefully curated life. I didn't cry, not anymore. Instead, I felt something new, anger, sharp and clear, like a librarian spotting a misfiled book. Claire had used my love against me, but love wasn't my only strength. I'd spent decades finding answers, organizing chaos, and I wasn't done. I started compiling everything, bank records, loan documents, that adoption certificate. I backed them up on a flash drive, printed copies, and stored them in the locked box with Tom's letter. Claire thought she'd written me out of her story, but I was about to rewrite the ending. She'd built a life on lies, and I was going to pull them apart, page by page, until the truth was all that remained. The courthouse in Albany hadn't changed since I'd gone there years ago to renew my library's community grant. Back then, I was just a librarian with a purpose, not a woman fighting for her life. Now at 65, I walked through those heavy doors with Daniel by my side, my navy coat buttoned tight, Tom's old watch ticking on my wrist. Claire had filed a petition to declare me mentally incompetent, a move to seize my accounts and lock me away for good. She thought she'd shelved me like an outdated book, but I was ready to prove I was still worth reading. Inside Claire sat, at the front, her tailored blazer crisp, her face a mask of concern. She stood as I entered, offering a smile that might fool a stranger but not me. I saw the calculation in her eyes. The judge, a woman with silver hair and a no-nonsense stare, called the case in the matter of Eleanor Brooks's mental competency. Claire's lawyer went first, painting me as a confused old woman who'd wandered off, vulnerable to manipulation. He played voicemails I'd left Claire, clipped and edited to make me sound frantic, lost. "She's not herself," he said, waving a letter from a psychiatrist I'd never met. My hands clenched. Claire took the stand, her voice soft, practiced. "I love my mom," she said, eyes glistening just enough. I'm scared she's being taken advantage of. I stood, my heels clicking on the floor. My turn, Your Honor. I handed the judge a folder, my hands steady from years of sorting library cards. Inside was a psychiatric report from Dr. Helen Carter, who'd spent hours with me, confirming I was sharp, deliberate, and sound. I added a log of every book I'd read since leaving Maple Grove, notes I'd taken to stay organized, proof I was in control. I also have evidence of other matters, I said, my voice clear, but I'll save those for now. I didn't show the adoption certificate or the forged loans, not yet. That was my ace. Instead, I looked at the judge. My daughter put me in a facility without my consent, took my phone, my freedom. Now she wants my dignity. Don't let her. The courtroom went quiet. The judge leaned back, her pen tapping the folder. I'll review the evidence, she said. We'll reconvene in 10 days. Claire's smile faltered as she left, her jaw tight. I walked out, head high, Daniel's nod telling me we'd done enough. For now. Back in Virginia, I mailed a copy of Claire's forged documents to the Department of Justice, anonymous but precise. The war wasn't over, but I was no longer just defending myself. I was fighting back. The courtroom win wasn't the end. It was a spark. Back in my Virginia cottage, I watched Claire's next move unfold on my laptop. She'd gone to the local news, her face tear-streaked, pleading for help to find her confused mother. I just want her safe, she told the camera, her voice breaking just right. I laughed, a sound so sharp it startled me. Safe? She caged me to steal my life, but her performance was cracking. Online, people started asking questions. Why hadn't I been allowed to speak? Why was Claire so quick to label me unfit? The whispers grew louder, and I knew it was time to tell my story. I called a journalist, Sarah, who'd reached out to Daniel after the hearing. We met in a quiet diner, me in a plain scarf and glasses, her recorder between us. I told her everything, Maple Grove, the suitcase, Claire's lies about my memory. I left out the adoption and the Swiss account, keeping those cards close. The story ran 2 days later. Mother or pawn? The silencing of Eleanor B. It spread like wildfire. People connected the dots, speculating about Claire's motives. I stayed silent, letting the truth simmer. Then I acted. I donated $4 million anonymously to a national non-profit fighting elder abuse. Within days, they launched a campaign, my case its centerpiece, without naming me. The tide turned. Claire's polished image frayed. Her firm lost clients. Her social media flooded with doubt. I didn't stop there. I founded Brooks Haven, an organization to provide legal aid and counseling for seniors facing exploitation. I poured another $1 million into it, picturing Mabel and others like her, trapped in places like Maple Grove. I even sent a box of books, real books, not magazines, to the facility's library. Claire's lies were crumbling, and while she scrambled to save herself, I was building something bigger. My pain wasn't just mine anymore. It was a beacon for others, a chance to rewrite their stories too. A month later, I stood outside Maple Grove, the air crisp, the trees bare. I wasn't the same woman Claire had left here. Sophia greeted me with a hug that felt like home, her eyes bright. You did it, Eleanor. We walked the halls, now lined with new books I'd donated, and I spoke to the residents, their faces soft with recognition. You're not a burden, I told them. You're not finished. Their nods felt like my own heart mending. Back in Virginia, I wrote letters to Sophia, Daniel, and one to myself. Dear Eleanor, you loved deeply, and that was never wrong. You wrote your own ending. I read it aloud, a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird open beside me, the cottage quiet. Claire's arrest came quietly, headlines fading. I was free.